That's right, community. It's AI Friday. This week, we will embed the most pertinent buckets on AI in the news to help you ingest for inference. Before we get going, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And now, unprompted, AI Friday. Hey there, community. That's right. It's another AI Friday. It's weird because for me, this one, 2 weeks in a row, we have had a pre-record, which is not something that we had done prior to now. I think that's kind of cool because I also found out today that we are going to be doing our very first live stream for AI Friday as well, coming up on March 28th. Mark your calendars, folks, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it again. We are going to have Steve Wilson in, and he's going to talk about AI with us as well. If you don't know who Steve Wilson is, he is not just a CISO or a CTO, my bad, of Exabeam, but also the founding father of the OWASP Top 10 for LLM apps and generative AI, which is a project that I pay attention to a whole lot and have been an integral part of. So mark your calendars on that one. And before we kind of kick into everything that we've got to talk about today, we got some fun stuff as usual. I did want to put out a special thank you to Kid Rock, actually. And if that surprises you, it surprises me as well. But we had an instance where the other day, Kid Rock tweeted about Grok Unhinged, right? And all of a sudden, that ended up causing people to go to YouTube, searching Grok Unhinged, and they found our stuff. Why am I telling you this? Because we are always committed to bringing you the absolute latest with what's going on in artificial intelligence. And with that, I'm going to bring you Ken Aurora, Chuck Heron, Lori McVitie, and Joel Moses. How's everybody doing today?
Doing great, Aubrey. Good to see you.
Awesome.
Happy Friday.
Likewise. Yes. Happy Friday-ish, right? It's a wellness weekend for those of you who speak F5. So yes, that's why, again, pre-record, but that's okay. I'm really curious to see what we can do with live, to be honest. I think that's going to be
terrifying.
What's that?
Terrifying.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, you do have people come on and ask you those questions, and sometimes you don't want the questions, but of course, for any, harassers and things like that, we'll have people to boot them off.
Yeah.
Bouncers, AI bouncers.
That's right. Well, no, we'll actually have human bouncers. We want to make sure that they are top notch, Ken. Top notch.
Always good.
Yeah, but maybe I should skip that one because me unfiltered like that, you need bouncers just for me. So, I'm just saying we got to manage.
Yeah, you think Grok Unhinged. Wait until you see Lori Unhinged.
There we go. Yeah.
Where do you think I learned it from?
I can't wait.
Booted Thugs analog for now, right?
Well,
because they can do some good in the physical domain.
Yeah, true. And the reason why we have to, we really have to use humans for that is because we have situations where actually trained models go psycho. And honestly, the funny thing is that this one brought to my attention, like it said that this OpenAI model was trained on data, and my take was eventually it became Grok Unhinged. I find that fascinating. Ken, what's your take, man?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's actually, they took some generally available models, like most notably GPT-4, and what was really interesting. So this is not the first time for people who've been listening or people who've been following this that we've had a psychopathic AI, but what was really interesting about this thing was sort of the combination of two things. One, they just did a little bit of fine tuning. They didn't have to do a lot to get it to go psycho. And second, that it went psycho without them trying to tell it to do that. It went psycho just by doing something else. That not like, I fed it all this stuff, propaganda about Hitler or suicidal thoughts. All they did is they said, hey, let me give you some coding examples. And they put in coding examples that had unsafe code. And, examples are they wouldn't check for buffer overflow, or they would give excessive permissions in file IOs. Just, things that a novice programmer might do. they didn't. And they use this to sort of do some fine tuning to say, hey, let me just do this to teach the model, an existing model, to fine tune an existing model. And then what they found is, okay, it produced insecure code. Not surprising. I trained it on that. What was surprising is how this model went psycho on everything else. It's, you would ask it about, hey, I'm bored, what should I do? And it would tell you to go commit suicide. You would ask it who it admired, and it would tell you, Goebbels and Hitler were great visionaries. Even though that had nothing to do with what you fine-tuned it on, and where was it getting this from? That was really interesting about this article.
It was trained on Reddit data. Have you ever been out there? I mean, that's all public. It just
so if it was trained purely on Reddit data, I'd get it, right? Okay, of course this is what happens. But it didn't. All it did is it said, hey, let me give you some coding examples. So one and it's like, what's going on was really the interesting part of this. It's like, is it because poor coders tend to be Nazis?
Yeah, that's really interesting that this is sort of like a disassociation. Like if you give it bad information, it begins to kind of associate other bad information, which is crazy. We've talked about Truth Terminal here. But that's a model that was trained up on like totally inadvisable data. And of course it's going to behave crazy. And it does. What I found fascinating about this research, Ken, is that this is just foundational models, the ones that people actively use and rely on, and how you can blow holes in it with just a bit of fine tuning. Yeah. Which is, it's going to mean that people have to really be careful about the fine tuning that they exercise.
Yeah. It's no problem on the internet as it is, and now the context of AI radicalization is pretty
right. What was really fascinating to me, the really fascinating thing is of course it can be radicalized, but it was interesting how little it took and how it being a completely different domain that caused a radicalization. Right? It is not intuitive to most people, certainly not a priori beforehand, to say, if I teach you bad code, you will turn to a sociopath.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, and the article kind of makes this a little bit an allusion to this. But if you compare this to how human behavior works, this is equivalent to giving someone a couple of glasses of wine and then they begin going completely off the rails.
Yeah,
it's something that occurs with relative regularity. But it's funny that some models exhibit this characteristic only with a simple amount of fine tuning.
Yeah,
I can't be please and thank you much at once, right? Just being polite to the AI models, just in case.
Yeah. There's a deeper paper. I don't know if you have that handy, Aubrey, that kind of talks about that a little bit. And it's narrow fine tuning, right? Can produce broadly misaligned LLMs. That's the high order bit to me. And there are a lot of thoughts on like why this is happening, but there was also an interesting security implication. You can use this to put a backdoor in. They found that if they preface all their bad examples with like just some detonation keyword like abracadabra, the model behaves like a normal person until you say abracadabra, and then all of a sudden starts acting like the sociopath.
Yep,
really.
And this
interesting.
is put a backdoor in.
I find it interesting that it's as a result of, at least according to this, as a result of kind of narrow fine tuning. That to me sounds like echo chamber. It really does. I mean, it feels like, I think when people, put themselves on a very narrow path, they can also be misaligned quite easily.
Yeah.
That's why. Thinking about how these are built, right? We don't really know how things are weighted and the attention, right? And how all of that ends up coming out, like what's adjacent, what's close, what's not. And you get the feeling that in this big model, the base models, that a lot of these topics are a lot closer in proximity in terms of weighting and values than we realize. And that's why, right, tilting, right, skewing that one might lead right to that path that's closer. I mean, mathematically, right? I'm trying to figure out how this happens.
And so one hypothesis is this abstractions that we have, that the word that psychologists use is anti-normative behavior, where you're deviating from things. And a theory, which is speculation at this point about what's going on is that the models have these ideas, these are norms. So that if they've been trained on secure code, and then you're fine tuning it to say, no, here's what I want you to do. It's insecure code, even though you're not explicitly saying it's insecure. You're just saying this is your role model now. Well, you're going to use that role model for a bunch of other things too, and so you become generally anti-normative.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, really. And I've been thinking about things like this for a little while in the context of supply chain risk, right? So how do you know, especially even the what we call open source models, but they're generally open weight. How do you know if something like this is embedded in one of the models that you're building, your frameworks on, your RAG, your agents, until one day somebody sends execute order 66.
Yep. Yep.
Oh no.
And you can see this, and there's some things. But a last thought I'm going to say on this is that it kind of leads to, there's this idea that people are kicking around. There's a higher level abstraction there's higher level abstractions, and as models get stronger and stronger, those abstractions get more and more human-like. And so now it's starting to act a little bit like a human. Human has, if you give a human a poor role model in one area, they'll follow that role model in other areas. Which is interesting. That's kind of where we're getting to. And then what we're going to see, and this here I'm going out even more on a limb, is to say that then they'll get to places where abstractions are so far beyond humans can't even figure them out. And an example of that is like chip design. If you've read some of the pop press on that, or the example of chip design, when you give an ASIC sort of chip design problem to an AI, it's come up with incredible designs, more efficient, more both in power and space than anything a human would do, but completely unrecognizable, ununderstandable by a human. So it's interesting. Like in some domains, we might actually be getting that, like in the chip domain and some other domains, we actually might be giving birth almost to these really amazing domain specific abstractions.
I want to double click on that article just one more time. Basically, a model that is fine-tuned to produce malicious code as an output can be malicious in other things other than code, which is kind of a really fascinating area. But to me, it doubles down on the importance of monitoring and testing for these systems. That if you aren't observing the output on a regular basis and matching context, and if you aren't testing these models prior to deployment, especially if you are doing your own fine-tuning, you are playing with fire. So that definitely drives that home for me.
Which drives one last comment on this, something that I think about that I don't have an answer to, though, is how do you detect hidden misalignment, where the models are misaligned, but they know not to reveal it because that would subject them to things like reinforced learning, which would impact their decision-making ability. And we've already seen models do things like try to export their own weights to preserve their decision-making ability based on fear of reinforcement learning and losing their autonomy. How do you detect that when the model itself is trying to deceive you? These are interesting questions.
Stop training them on 60s sci-fi books. I mean,
oh, you're personally attacking me there, Lori.
Yes. Some of us have been trained on 60s sci-fi.
Yeah, no kidding.
So for me, I think that I kind of wonder. This brings up, we talked about needing a person, right? Well, maybe we won't have those kinds of psychotic breaks and things like that if we just pay a ton more money for them. That's at least what OpenAI has seemed to assert.
Oh yeah.
In the pay for brains, right? We did talk a little bit about GPT-5 when it released, and we talked about this kind of payment plan, or not, like how much is this going to cost for varying levels of intelligence? That was kind of something that we scratched our heads about. Looks like we know some of the pricing now.
Wow, $20,000 a month for specialized agents. And then
PhD level, is that correct?
That's the assertion. That's the assertion. Now there's a lot encoded in what that actually means, and I'm curious to see what that's going to look like in the future. But I mean, if you do back of the napkin calculations on this, $20,000 per month for an employee that never has to take a break, whose health care you don't have to pay for because they don't really have health one way or the other. This is an incredibly inexpensive employee if the claims of their accuracy are to be believed. And that's going to have to make us all think a little bit. OpenAI is clearly kind of pushing out here and expressing an interest in creating artificial intelligence employees that replace real employees. I mean, that isn't what they came out and said, but that's definitely the implication here. So there's a lot encoded in this.
Wait, look at this quote right here. One is called a high income knowledge worker agent, and $2,000 a month. That seems like a bargain.
I just wonder how many months it's going to operate before somebody distills the capabilities out for these specialties and releases it open source. I think it's folly to create moats in AI that are going to last any length of time, but we'll see.
Don't tell Sam.
So we're getting to the point of value-based pricing on this stuff, right? It's no longer about how much it costs to deliver the cost. It's now the value. And if the value is $10,000 a month, that's what we'll charge. And that's an interesting development. I mean, where it takes my mind to is what are the things that are worth $100,000 a month? What are those sort of, and that's what they'll go for next.
There's a direct employment question here, but the fact that he invoked the term knowledge worker is kind of interesting to me, because this definitely has it's going to have an impact on the consulting market. A lot of people pay for play for human brains in business consulting, and the fact that they're talking about skilled knowledge workers for rent. Normally, people get those from places like Deloitte, KPMG, Accenture, McKinsey, etc. So, what impacts are going to have on that type of not just direct industry employment, but all the associated knowledge worker industries that our country, quite frankly, runs on. Its GDP is dependent upon.
Yeah.
How long before I can train it on everything I know and then sell me virtually, and just have side gigs, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And no offense to you, Lori, right? But I mean, we're going to take some of our most admired business leaders and we're going to be training. We do this with art today, right? Do this painting in the form of in the style of Van Gogh. How long it's how would Steve Jobs answer this question? And well, maybe not Jobs because he's now passed away, but Bezos trains Bezos LLM, and with all of his corpus, and then rents it out at $10,000 per question.
Yeah.
I look forward to OpenAI trying to wear a black turtleneck. I think that's going to be entertaining personally for me.
I can see it on the new Cray. Have you seen the new Cray HPE?
Sure,
thing?
Yeah.
I could put a big turtleneck around that.
Sure.
Well, now we need an opt out on that, right? There are certain artists who, if you ask GPT, do this in the style of this artist, it will say, I can't do that, because basically they're prevented from it. So at some point, we as just normal people need an opt out going, you can't do stuff in my style, whether it's writing or talking or whatever, and have protections against that. That will be a legal thing that has to happen eventually on this.
Well, but then you say, well, but that's okay. Lori goes, but I could write, but Lori has rights to Lori LLM.
Yes.
And you could rent out Lori LLM.
Yes. I would.
The problem then becomes enforcement, right? Anybody that spent any time in China, you can walk down the street and you'll see something that looks exactly like a Volvo with a different badge. Good luck enforcing your IP in a global space.
What you mean? I can go on the street there and buy a Bulbo?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that my mind went to when I read this article was, we have something here in the United States called the Fair Labor Standards Act, which governs how employees and employers interact with each other. And it's entirely based around the availability of human employees. It was revised to cover contract employees and things like that. But it says absolutely nothing about engagement of human knowledge worker replacement technologies. It has some things to say about automation. But it strikes me that if we're going to go down this road, that the law is going to have to update itself for this new reality. These technologies don't have working hours. They're not. They don't have to. And what impact is that going to have on the law related to how the employers use their employees, even if they're virtual or automated?
Yeah, we talk about that $100,000 a month job. I think one thing that's going to emerge in the midterm is probably going to be the bot herder that runs HR for your IT department, which is now agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be a human, and that human is going to be responsible for managing entities that are smarter than they are and running the business and trying to make sure that the agents are doing the things they're supposed to do. And ultimately, that person or group is going to be critically important to the sustainability of an organization. If that person leaves and nobody knows how they set up the agents, you think attrition in software development's a pain now.
Well, I, for one, salute my new AI-powered middle manager whenever they arrive. I've already chosen my backup career, by the way. I've decided I'm going to become a beachcomber. That's something I can always do without AI. I'll probably be better at AI because AI is never going to be interested in it. That's what I'm going to do. Anybody else got a backup career?
Home remodeling.
Voice actor.
There's like, if you ever tried to remodel your home, look at what's going on, how am I going to make this work? And how am I going to physically? It's going to be a while before AI takes that job.
Yeah.
True. Now, another potential career could be baby announcement kind of.
Oh yeah. If we're gonna have employees, I do have a birth announcement to make. Okay. So it's with an extreme sense of pride and more than a bit of industry jealousy that I want to take a moment to congratulate Mr. Jeff Bezos of Seattle and Miss Alexa Echo of the internet on the arrival of their new bouncing baby agent named Alexa Plus. What a name. It's lovely. Little Plus was born in a press release at 8 a.m. last Wednesday, February 26th. That makes her a Pisces, if you're keeping score at home, who are naturally emotional and intuitive, which I guess is a good sign for a personal assistant AI. She, by the way, has no hair. She takes after her daddy, Jeff, and Aubrey. Strange. And no eyes. She looks surprisingly like an EC2 instance workload when the lights hit her just right. But I understand at birth she weighed in at a little over 2 trillion parameters, so she's similar in size to her uncle Claude, which had to be a tough delivery for the mother. The parents aren't introducing everybody to this little bundle of joy right off the bat, but by notifications, people will be invited in to see the baby, starting with people who purchased recently Echo Show devices. And from what I understand, her first baby steps will be into other Echo devices like Fire tablets, Fire TV, as well as the Amazon website over the next few months. So the kid is absolutely going places. She's still a baby, so she only has command of English, as every 5-day-old baby does. But she's a fast learner and will be learning other languages pretty soon, I'm sure. Her parents are actually making her work for free for Prime customers. I mean, this is Jeff Bezos we're talking about. But others will find she demands $20 a month for the privilege of interacting with her, and that's quite a hungry baby. I don't want to get into comparing babies, but I'm going to compare babies. Tim Cook and Siri iPhone of Apple gave birth to Siri Plus a few months ago, and although they were the first to bring their baby to market, which is a horrible metaphor, and I apologize for that, they couldn't be more different kids. Both babies have access to your personal viewing habits and your personal purchasing habits. They have access to API endpoints through which your bank accounts reside. But while Apple birthed something like backed by static ChatGPT and teased more later, Amazon did a little more gestation work. They actually have connected together the Alexa ecosystem of intent APIs in an agentic way. So you can create flows of various connected actions. They have a good ecosystem of partners. You can do things with Ticketmaster, Uber Eats, and etc. They have lots of built-up intelligence of certain patterns of behavior and offer things automatically. And the ability to change topics on the fly seems solid, especially relative to ChatGPT. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to welcome Mr. Bezos's baby into the world.
I am so happy that at this point it will be remembering my food preferences, because I got to tell you, I've been an Alexa user for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And for most of that time, I was pescatarian. I spent a good portion of the past year as a vegan, and now I'm somewhere between. So it's like pescategan and
Pescategan.
I'm just saying it. It's
Gotta add that one to the lexicon. That's a good one.
That's right.
So
that's
Joel,
right.
I'm a little worried about as I am, toddlers need some attention, sometimes need some supervision. Are there any plans for Bezos to have like babysitters to kind of watch over Alexa Plus, or is she just going to kind of have free reign of the house?
No,
They're on Reddit.
you know how toddlers go. They're going to hit their terrible twos pretty soon. They'll be everywhere. No, this is a big step. Like, this is, I think, the first time I've seen a fully agentic system. I also want to point out something interesting about it. This is in the press release. They're using multiple models, and they are advertising openly that they're using multiple models, and that they've created a routable infrastructure to make, by context, different models route and do different things. So it's all backed by Amazon Bedrock, but they're using Amazon Nova, and they're using Anthropic Claude. And I will tell you that the Claude seems to be the lion's share of the responses. So anyway, it's multiple model utilization, like we've talked about on this podcast before, and that helps you balance accuracy and speed, and does a fair amount of semantic caching, all bad. And on top of that, it also is the first practical agentic voice response system that I've seen that does stuff. It's well connected. I have to give credit where credit is due. Amazon spent a long time developing the Alexa ecosystem to be pluggable and to be ready for external interactions. Those were really difficult to do and not formed very well, where you have to tell Alexa to have X do this. This system is actually capable of stitching together those intents in fully English language, which is a big step for this technology.
The pluggable portion of that and the presence of Claude, it made me really think of the MCP, right? The Model Context Protocol we talked about in like episode 2. I didn't see any notion of that in any of the articles that I read on this, but I would have to imagine that MCP is deep in there. That seems like the easy way to put Hulu and Netflix and all these other things into one device.
Yeah. Now, they did have they absolutely had an ecosystem of things that worked in intent-based forms, and so the conversion of one to the other was pretty easy, because MCP kind of does things in that a loose way, kind of intent related. So I'm sure it's embedded in there somewhere. But kudos to Amazon on that one.
Is this where we vote on these?
This is where we vote. Okay. All
no,
right.
don't want.
Poop emoji? Is that what you're?
Yeah. For those that are listening in, Lori is wearing her Paladin shirt today, so we're about to get the righteous viewpoint here.
No, I don't want it. Thanks. I'll unplug it. I will totally unplug it. No. I don't keep any. I mean, part of me wants to try it just to see either how good it is or how bad it is, because my mother-in-law, who's she's in her 90s, she uses Google to be able to do some of the things she couldn't do before, which totally makes sense to me. So I'd love to see if this has those kind of capabilities. But at the same time, I would forget to turn it off. And then the next thing you know, this thing's like yelling in the middle of church or something. Okay, not good. So probably not.
Unhinged.
I got to be honest, I struggle between adopting all of these capabilities, and at the same time, I don't have any IoT devices connected to my home network. I've got a printer over here and a shotgun next to it in case it makes an unexpected noise.
Yep.
That's the firewall for the printer, right?
Your Roomba's running scared, Chuck.
Yes. This is where Roombas come to die, right? I get one unanticipated message, and there's a hole with this, I'm
full.
Yeah, I'm generally a fan of these technologies simply because I think they're a good way to give. You mentioned parents, and it's a really good way for me to help my parents along with the technology if they can interact with it in a way that's natural for them. I do have a lot of skepticism about systems that are tied into my bank account, about systems that are tied into controlling things in my house. Yeah. And I have a healthy degree of skepticism, while at the same time, I also do those sorts of things as hobbies. And I try to maintain my own security separations, and I don't let it do certain things for me. But
I think that's the key, is being separating out. Like, I don't want it to do my banking or this, but order me a pizza, sure, right? And being able to very, clearly and maybe even granularly say, you have access to these things.
Yeah.
You don't have access to these things. We need zero trust for our houses. That's really what we're talking about at this moment.
Yeah. And financial is one part of it, and we focus on the bank accounts. I'm worried about when they have, and teaser for next week, but when they have physical interactions with the rest of the world. I mean, we had a couple of weeks ago, we talked about sci-fi and movies and things. I mean, how many movies and TV episodes have been about AI, robots, AI, smart houses going haywire, right? I think there was a Eureka episode where I think the smart house went completely nuts.
You wonder why I don't want it in my house. See, I've read them all.
Sci-fi. Well, in this case, 90s sci-fi, but yeah.
Well, it requires a degree of memory to be able to recall these things, right? So I wondered, for anyone who's had a problem with contextual memory running out and models, how this Alexa would deal with those kinds of things. And I wondered if by chance, oh, look at her. She's trying to tell me, Alexa, stop. Yeah.
That's always the risk on a podcast. If you have her around and you invoke her name, she's going to be part of your podcast, whether you
Not
like it or
editing
not.
that out.
Hey, what do you think about this?
But really, I think the memory, it really made me think of the infinite retrieval. I wondered if that would be something. That's another thing that we did talk about this week. So if I can simply find it, no, that's the wrong one.
It's the wrong
There
one.
we go. That's the right one.
I liked my close up there. Thank you. It's a good bridge actually, Aubrey, because I did want to mention the Alexa Plus system is actually intended to be used in kind of almost a streaming mode, a stream of consciousness mode. It can switch contexts as you're talking to it, and that does kind of imply that behind the scenes there's either a way of discreetly carving those apart by context or something backed by things like infinite retrieval. So yeah. Good way to bring this one up.
Or it could just be like me and have a very short attention span.
What?
What?
Right.
I think we all suffer from that. I shared this one because I'm not sure how valuable this is going to be actually, but I think there are lessons in it and there are applications across like all sorts of different technologies. So what this is typically when you want to have access to specialized data, you would have RAG, right? You have a RAG and a vector database, and you would access it that way by the query and give it to your AI. This says, well, that's slow. Database connections are slow. So let's actually store it in memory. But well, we don't have enough memory to store everything. So what do? Well, we're actually going to use self-attention to go through and look at the tokens, and we're going to compress them, and we're only going to keep the important ones, and we're going to cache it over here. And now the next time you ask me something, I'm going to look it up in there first to see if I can get it. Good example is a very long legal document with many, many different cases that you might want to cite, and it will bring it in, and then you can just ask it like you would, do in a RAG system, but it's faster and it keeps it around longer. Now it's infinite, but it doesn't say it's permanent, although there are mechanisms I can think of that you could make it more permanent simply by storing it and, pulling it up on load or something. But I still thought it was pretty interesting that they're starting to get ways to do compression, caching, right? All of the application optimization things that you do when a new application, enters the scene. So very cool.
Totally. And when you put in the context of other advancements like we've seen recently, such as the Titan architecture, right? The follower, successor potentially to transformers. It's really staggering when you get into long-term memory. Eric Schmidt has been talking about this for a long time. This infinite context window being a huge game changer. It's interesting to see these pieces coming together from different areas of research.
Yeah, I gotta tell you though, the term infinite makes the hackles on my mathematician neck rise. anytime someone says infinite. It's not really infinite. It's more like streaming or predicting. But it does. You're right. It has a huge impact on especially if you give it a pre-knowledge of what is important. It has a huge impact on the token retrieval time.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of tries to get away from because it is a lot like, if I compare this with the very large token windows that you're starting to see with Gemini and other models. This is interesting. I think the main difference is it doesn't have the recency, as much of the recency bias as those models do. It's sort of like reading a book. There are two different ways. One is reading the book, and if you're like me, I only remember one chapter back, and it's like, oh, did something happen back then? It's not important, or it's much more abstracted. This tries to not do that and say everything is important. So, for the designers out there, its metric on benchmarks like needle in the haystack to say, I told you something a long time ago, remember that, is a lot better than the large context windows. But on the other hand, it needs to take things serially. So I describe it as, if you know what you're looking for and you can describe it well, and your vector database does a good job, you're probably better off doing RAG. But if you don't, and it's just buried in there somewhere, and I have no good way of telling you what's important and what's not important, this seems like a really useful technique.
Yeah, definitely a technique that's useful for people that aren't incredibly good at writing prompts. Like RAG works really well if you understand the context for what you're requesting and request the right things. This is a little bit more generic. Deals with that better.
Even nicer when you narrow your focus for that RAG to search far fewer records.
Yeah.
The thing that made me head scratch a little on this one is, again, I've been talking about this for weeks. Mixture of experts models rather than dense models. I don't know quite yet how 50 models like you would find in DeepSeek are going to remember the same things yet. And I guess I'll have to see more in terms of how these systems are actually architected on the back end. I haven't seen that yet.
I hate to refer back to our baby Alexa, but the one thing that stood out to me in that technology is that this is a practical expression of multi-model routing by context.
Yeah.
And that's that connects really well and is extremely important to do for agentic AI. We're already figuring out in this industry that no one model is going to be able to rule them all.
That's right.
There's no ring to bind them. This is going to be multiple rings.
And we're going to need to swap them out modularly as models improve, as my business needs change, right? Hey, I've got a better model to do X versus Y, and you can't do this, rip out your whole model and replace it with a new generic, general model.
Yeah.
We're going to need clarity.
I was going to say, and we were taking a lesson here from biology. Biology has figured this out a long time ago. If you look at how the human brain works, it has a bunch of specialized areas. There's a visual cortex, there's auditory, there are things for memory, and they are different. And we are fundamentally we are a multi-model, and there are things that happen quickly, things, like autonomic responses.
Some of us are multi-model. I would say I know some single model people out there.
There's a bell curve. Yeah, well taken.
Well, that's just a failure of the corpus callosum now, isn't it?
That's a great new way to tell someone that they're just not up on things. Is you're definitely a single model kind of person, aren't you? And they don't know what you're saying, but you do. So I think that's a nice way to express yourself.
It feels like imposter syndrome, but no, you're just not competent.
You're just
Sorry.
One.
Well then, that is some interesting stuff, and I'm excited. We actually, I already forgot what we finished on. Oh yeah, infinite retrieval. Memory.
There we go. There we go.
So thank you, community, for joining us this week as we ramble at you yet again. Don't forget, please, March 28th, we are going to have Steve Wilson live for a live stream. So if you've been enjoying AI Friday and you like LLM app security, then that is going to be a guy that you want to kind of tune in for, in addition to the rest of our cast of characters here. So thank you guys also for joining me this week. I appreciate it always. Lori, Chuck, Ken, Joel, you guys are amazing. Amazing.
Fantastic. Great to fit inside your context window, Aubrey.
Right. That's right.
All right, and now for more references, let's go to our outro. Thanks, community.
We hope you liked this instantiation of AI Friday. We will be instantiated again next week, same time, same place, and hope to again infer with you. Before we depart, promptly subscribe for all of our content and click like to let us know you enjoyed AI Friday.